Zen Buddhism. Why are we studying Zen Buddhism? Well, so Zen Buddhism, it comes from a tradition that's around 3,000 years old. And these people have spent entire lives, entire generations, trying to get to the bottom of these fundamental questions about life. So it makes sense to take a look at what these people have said and really to take it seriously, because why else would these people have wasted so much time on something that really didn't matter? So, what is Zen Buddhism? Zen Buddhism is a way. So, it is not a philosophy, it is not a religion, it is not a science. It's really just the way. The way to what? The way to achieve enlightenment, or nirvana, as they call it, to get to that blissful state of existence that we know it as. The root of the question, okay, is what are we trying to escape from? So if you've taken down the road of Buddhism, really what you're asking is, I suffer, and I have a problem with the fact that I suffer. And I want to get rid of suffering. And so what you do is you decide to take up Zen Buddhism, right? Is you decide to go through all of these hoops with the final destination being escaping your suffering. And escaping your suffering equates to escaping yourself. What are you trying to escape from? So fundamentally, all suffering comes down to just this. It comes down to fear and desire. Fear that something won't happen the way that you want it to happen, and the desire of wanting something to happen the way in which you want it to happen. And these two basic fundamental understandings really underpin all of what suffering is. And this is what you're trying to understand and get away from, because you think somehow that by achieving this, you will somehow end up happier. What Buddhism is, okay, it is the way out of this. And now the way out of this, surprisingly, has to do with just language. The reason it has to do with language is because your thoughts, your fears and desires are constructed linguistically in your own head. And that is what you end up focusing on the entire time you're trying to figure out your problems. Let's really get into this. Your desires and your fears are a sentence. Okay? You have thought up in your head, in words, what these things are. And now these things run and they pretty much dominate your life. And sometimes it gets so extreme that you turn to something like this, right? Like you turn to something like Buddhism in order to get away from it. So what we have to do is let us explain what enlightenment is. Enlightenment, if we look at the actual Buddhist literature, is much simpler than it seems. And it is something completely attainable, right? A Buddha, and there are many Buddhas, simply means one who is awakened, right? Awakened to what? Awakened to the fundamental understanding of the universe. So what's the fundamental understanding of the universe? Well, the fundamental understanding of the universe is that all is suffering. And so once you've woken up from this, you no longer suffer. What's the methodology and how do they go about getting us out of this suffering? Let us start like this. Okay. When you say the word suffering, suffering implies, just as the word says, someone who suffers, and then a thing. So a subject and a verb predicate, right? Or you can say subject and object. So the word suffering implies that there is someone who suffers. Because how can there be suffering if there's no one who suffers? And language, what it does, is it holds these implications inside of it without us ever knowing. So, as it is written, there is only suffering, there are none who suffer. Because in order for something to suffer, okay, it implies there has to be this object being you. What does this mean? So what Buddhism tries to explain to us is that really there is no self. And what this means is that yourself is an idea in your head, it is a word, it is a construct, and it is constructed simply through our use of language. Language is convention. Your idea of yourself is also convention. What does this mean? Your idea of yourself is essentially arbitrary memories that you have picked to remember, and then that collection, because it happened in the past, seems more real to you than this present, because what happened in the past is fixed and final, and what happens in the present, that's not something you can cognitively grasp. Because it's a process that's occurring, and you can only think about things that happened in the past, or you can only think about things as an idea. So not as the actuality of the thing, but just as a memory or a made-up future prediction about what you are. What Buddhism tries to do, and what enlightenment is, okay, what nirvana is, what the cessation of suffering is to get out of yourself as a linguistic object. Let's look at it like this. Okay. So, say you want to embark on the journey to nirvana. You've said, you know what, I've had enough of this, I'm going to become enlightened. And what you do is you set out on a little boat. Okay? And on the other shore is nirvana. Right? On the other shore is paradise. On the other shore is where there is no suffering. You get on this boat and you follow whatever thing you saw on YouTube that prescribes to you how to get out of suffering. Okay? I don't know, you meditate, you do your rituals, whatever. Well, once you reach that shore and you turn around, what do you see? Well, you see nothing, because you have exited the world of distinctions, of language, of divisions, of duality. And what you see is you don't see any divisions between anything. So you don't really even know that you're in nirvana. And the reason that you don't know you're in paradise is because that's what paradise is. It is the ending of divisions, of categorizations, of thoughts and language, because any attempt to put into words what that experience of enlightenment is, of nirvana is exactly what keeps you from it. What does this mean? Okay, let's put it like this. You climb Mount Everest. Now, climbing Mount Everest, let's say that's your personal goal. You can't put into words when you come back what that represents to you, right? It's a personal feeling. That is your connection with God, with the divine. right? It's that idea of seeing a perfect sunset and then saying, ah, right? You come down from this massively crazy experience of climbing Mount Everest, which I have no idea why you would ever want to do, but it doesn't matter. You come down from there, and now what you've done is you have said, I've done it, but you can't really put that into words. You can't explain what that means to you, the significance of what that means to you, to another person, because it's an experience, and language is not capable of grasping the full totality of that experience. Right. So now you're going to ask, so what you're implying essentially is that everything then is the divine, because all of these experiences that I have that are so personal to me, that are my connection to life, all of these things that are my connection to life, I can't put into words. Right. So what's the next best thing? Well, the next best thing is maybe you paint a painting, you draw a picture, and then through that, other people see your experience. It inflects your experience to others. Now, that makes absolute sense, right? So, what we're left with is we are left with the understanding that language fails to grasp the world. It does it in a very utilitarian sense. And it's what's allowed us to create what's everything around us. But it is not the world. It is not our experience. Because our experience comes at us as an overwhelming wave. And what we have to do to understand it is we have to cut it apart. And we can only narrowly look at that through language and then talk about that specific thing one sentence at a time, one word at a time. So this is the issue, right? The issue is always to get out of language. Because when you are not thinking about yourself, you are simply living in the moment. The problem is never the moment. The problem is always thinking about thinking. So instead of being anxious, you're anxious about being anxious. Instead of being afraid, you're afraid of being afraid. So this thought about the thing is what keeps you from the thing. Okay? Another way to put this is that your idea of God keeps you from experiencing God. Right? So so you have like the biblical passage, right? The kingdom of heaven is on earth and men do not see it. If you want to see it, or if you want to talk about it in the Buddhist tradition is all things are Buddha things. All things are consciousness. Now you're going to ask, well, what does that mean? How can all things be consciousness? Well, if I take this cube, okay, when I drop this cube knows exactly what to do. In fact, it has a more concrete consciousness than you do, because whenever something acts upon it, it knows exactly what it's supposed to do. Whereas you wobble. You're always trying to figure out, well, what it is that I'm supposed to do, right? This comes to one of the principles of Buddhism. It is to achieve spontaneity. What is spontaneity? Well, spontaneity is not having this wobble. It's just allowing yourself to be yourself. Right? It's super interesting. So once you get rid of self-consciousness and you're just in the mode of being, that is the enlightened state, right? You're no longer thinking about thinking. You're just thinking about like doing or whatever. You're just doing. And that is the primary principle of Zen Buddhism, right? It is nirvana. It's you just being the expression of the consciousness that you are, right? What you are essentially is your consciousness trapped in this physical body. And you don't really have a choice, and you really didn't even make up what you are, right? Society tells you what you are. Society makes you into what it wants from you, but that doesn't mean that that's you, right? Your political beliefs, so actually most of your beliefs are ingrained into you by society. And now what you do is you take responsibility of those because there's nothing else. So you just say these things make up me, right? My like your personal tastes, your likes and dislikes, your identity, those are all arbitrary things that you made up for yourself. But that part we will get to when we talk about the Jungian persona in another video. So, Zen Buddhism. So Zen Buddhism is this idea of spontaneity. It is just being for the sake of being, right? What is the life's meaning of a flower? A flower is just a flower, and it does what a flower does. It exhibits the consciousness of a flower. It grows towards the sun. It's like heliotropism or whatever the scientific term is. It doesn't need instruction as to like so the flower is not asking why am I not a tree. It's just being a flower. In that same sense, that's what you should be too, because fundamentally that's what you are. You're an expression of this universe, this mode of being, and trying to categorize it, cut it off into boxes. That is what is called your ego. And your ego is just trying to make sense of it. Stop trying to make sense of it. Right? Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. Do the thing that your motive force wants you to do. And then that's the path. That is the way.